Matt, this team picked a really bad time to go through a rough patch, losing to BC and Virginia Tech. Common threads, common theme through these last two games, other than turnover. I mean, turnovers obviously jumps off the page. What else stands out to you?
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to even phrase it as a rough patch. I mean, that's who they are. There's always going to be a little bit of fluctuation in teams throughout the year. Do they play to the level of their competition? I mean, that might be a separate discussion. You can't lose at Boston College, and they did. And then after that, you can't lose the next one against the middle-of-the-pack team at home, and they did. So to suggest it's a rough patch means they're way better than that, and that if it's a rough patch, they're going to have to prove that coming up. And really, the saving grace, the best-case scenario for this team right now is that the games that you need to win to put on your resume are all still out there on the schedule. They do exist. That's no guarantee that you're going to win them, but they are available to you as opposed to being in the rearview mirror and you're in the same spot. If they do pick off anywhere from 1 to 3 or 4 or 5 of these games coming up, then we want to go back and say this period was a rough patch. Okay, but right now they haven't shown it. I
would say, they're 2.5 months into the season. These last two games, this is the worst they've played all year. So I don't know. That's kind of how I look at it, is they came off 3 straight wins, and they played back-to-back their 2 worst games of the season. No?
Yeah, they played bad. Are they the worst? I mean, they're bad, one way or the other. I mean, they haven't been the Warriors to begin with, yeah. Right? So they've had days, obviously, where they've played better. To me, the way they lost yesterday makes me think more that is the personality of the team. That wasn't a departure or some sort of exception, particularly when it's back-to-back and when everyone should know kind of what's at stake. So, yeah, we may turn out to say, give it another couple of weeks and look back and say, if one of the expressions of the year is dips, that this was a dip. But, they're dips that you can't have if you want to get where you're going.
I asked Coach Autry if there's a disconnect between the coaching staff and the players when it comes to fixing the turnovers, and he said, no, it's focus. What do you make of that?
Yeah, that's what I think it is. I was just kind of thinking just walking around downtown over here, it's like, is it coaching that they didn't get that rebound? Now, I don't remember the coaching staff jumping up and down and yelling 100 times like, hey, box out, we need to get this rebound. Did that need to be said? Right? I mean, first of all, you can't give up offensive rebounds on free throws anyway.
4-on-1.
Yeah, in any scenario in the game, that shouldn't really happen. But at the most, so no, I don't recall it being specifically reinforced. But it also, if I were the coach, I'd feel like, I had to point that out. So I think this team needs. I think it's one of the thoughts I had kind of waking up this morning is I think this team needs coaching. I think on their own, there's some really questionable basketball IQ type things. And what you're asking of the coaches now is get ahead of it. Obviously, in practice, they're dealing with what the other team does and how you can take that away and what plays to run and this, that, and the other. The turnover avoidance and that type of stuff has got to be dealt with, too. There's a lot to manage right now because I think there's just an absence of someone on the team, not a coach, a player, who's going to say, this is enough. We're not doing this anymore. 18 turnovers? What are you talking about? We're stopping that right now. And or we're diving on the floor for a loose ball, or we're getting a rebound. And so right now, Red and others, I think, are put in a tough spot and exposed to a degree because all that stuff needs to be manufactured. It needs to be done.
I think it was with you last week. We talked about Nathan George and all the turnovers, and I think I said to you, are we getting to the point where he might have to sit a little bit more, and does he lose time to others given how much he's turned the ball over? And then that came up in your pregame interview, right, with Adrian Autry, and he had an interesting take on that, and an interesting response. Didn't name George by name, right, but seemed to be alluding to him.
Yeah, I mean, I basically asked him, look, we talk about turnovers virtually every game. What more can be done. And his response in not so many words was, you put somebody else in the game. And they did do that yesterday. Why do you think Bryce Zephyr, it wasn't an accident or random choice that Bryce Zephyr played for the first time in a month. He was out there to calm things down, and he did. Now, Bryce Zephyr has limitations. He's not going to be somebody that the defense has to concern themselves with as a scorer and some other things, but he didn't give it to the other team and create issues that way. And you also don't need to, he didn't play in the second half. He doesn't necessarily have to come back and do that because he served his purpose of maybe just treading water while George and Starling both had 2 fouls. And, maybe it just kind of calms things a little bit. So they're trying to do different things. There's another one of these last night, pass it to William Kyle 20 feet from the basket. I don't know if you're trying to break a player's instinct or, that certainly has happened over time where you see them inclined to pass it to the wrong person, which you just can't do at this level. And maybe it takes a while to learn that. So some of those habits are hard to break, apparently.
Yeah. And another example is Donnie Freeman at BC gets a ball and he's passing it up to a player who's not going to be able to score it, and it's turned over. How do you,
I always thought about that. Like Frank Howard passing to Tyler Roberson. What are you doing? What are you doing?
Yeah. What's he going to do?
Why would you? Right.
Yeah.
So I think this, and I'm not around the grassroots scene, but I think the science of it almost is like in AAU, where you play a bazillion games, everybody's about the same talent level and decent. And if the guy's open, you pass it to him or whatever. When you get to this level and you have 7-footers that you haven't played with before, they have to be dealt with a certain way. William Kyle can be effective a little bit on the offensive end. He's not Kareem by any stretch, but he can serve a role there. But he can't get the ball running full speed down the middle of the floor and catch it off his shins. That's just a non-starter. They did that at Boston College. So why some of that has to be pointed out, I think, is super frustrating for everybody involved.
Along those lines, is there something? I know you listen to the show and you hear our callers and what's said in the chat and whatnot. Is there a narrative out there that you think is just not fair or not true right now, centered around Syracuse basketball?
Well, a lot of them. Fire the coach now, can't do it. It's not happening. Should have fired the coach after last year.
Hire Mello?
Wasn't going to happen. Hire Mello, DC, Diefendorf, not going to happen. I think. So there's a million. I got nowhere to be if you want to spend some time on that. The people that aren't in coaching can't jump in and coach. So stop it with that, okay? Should have let the coach go after 2 years. How are you going to hire the next coach then? Nobody wants to go work at a place where they think you're done in 2 years. Nobody does that, okay? Fire the coach in January. Not happening, all right? Now, they have this stretch ahead in February. It's going to decide what goes on here. If things start going the way, if they start going super bad or the continuation of this, there's no hope, then your decision is made and you already can start thinking about the future here. But to think that, after game number 19 or 20 that a move is going to be made, it's not. There isn't precedent for that. There certainly isn't precedent for that around here. And that's just not a realistic expectation.
We talk about the team not executing down the stretch last night. Red talked about that after the BC game on Saturday, that they didn't execute what was talked about in the timeout at the end of regulation. Up 3, there was, 17, 18 seconds left coming out of that timeout. How did that whole thing transpire? What do you make of that last sequence?
Yeah, now I'm told, this is after the game, a day or so after the game. I'm told from someone on the bench, we told them 100 times that we were fouling when it got under 10 seconds. Something lost in conversation there, forgotten about, lost in the moment, not in position. All of those things happen. You've got to ask the people who were in position or weren't in position to foul. Nathan, when Donald Hand, who in the defense of everything, Donald Hand's BC's best player, so you got to know he's capable. He hadn't done squadouche in 2 games. Right, he knocks down the 3 of that. But Nathan George was farther away than from me to you, Paulie. You can't give the foul in that situation.
Yeah,
William Kyle, I think, was supposed to be up. He wasn't. So how does that come to be? I don't know the answer. Do I think the coaching staff is inept and, it slipped our mind to mention it, or that it was an option, or that's what we wanted to do? I don't buy that. So I think there's plenty of. Go back to your idea of narrative. Look, is this coaching staff John Wooden and Adolph Rupp and whoever else you want to put a? Of course not. Okay, but it's not a bunch of bozos that walked in off the street. I just have a hard time buying that. We see a lot of what they're doing, what they're trying to do. It's not working out. Everybody needs some fresh air, and they got to win a game. Yeah,
and the other thing, though, Matt, that I ask in playing the devil's advocate is, why are the players not listening to the coach?
Yeah, I don't know. I think I don't know. And again, some of it is why do they have to even be told? I mean, I've used this example before. This is not telling tales out of school. They're fairly innocuous. I think it was probably the Stonehill game, but it could have been one of those ones before that, run before Christmas. End of the first half, Syracuse has a foul to give. It's right in front of us. You got a 4-year starter that's the defensive player that's in position to give the foul, and the head coach is stomping on the floor. Right. Bang, 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 bang. Why does he have to yell it 6 times to give the foul in that situation? Everybody who's paying attention to the game should know this is a foul to give, and let's do it. How about if you're in vagary as a player, like if you take the floor defensively, up 3 in that situation, everybody who's watching, all these knuckleheads, all of us who are watching these games, everybody's playing that debate. Do you foul or not foul? If it's not brought up in the huddle, how about you ask, hey, what are we doing here, right? So everyone should know, regardless of how it's communicated, if there's a disconnect, I don't know where it comes from or necessarily how to fix it. But in some cases, why does all this stuff need to be said? Your best player on the floor gets punked, shoved right in the back, and knocked under the backboard, the most important rebound of the game. It's super unfortunate. Some of that stuff is being addressed. That's why you get a new strength coach. That's why you do, right? What a bummer that is, But was it talking? Was it communication? I don't know. To quote the famous Paulie Scibilia, I don't know.
That's a good. It saves.
Sometimes you don't know.
Yeah,
you got to get that cross stitched on the back.
Sometimes you just don't know.
Yeah, sometimes you don't know. Sometimes, I mean, it's inexplicable.
I do know everybody knows more than me. That's all I
Seems
know.
like it. That's a narrative.
I'm not going to argue that.
All right. Anything else, Matt, before we part ways?
No, you guys tell me. I had to step out for a lunch meeting. So what did I miss today? What
everybody's been pretty calm.
Solutions or ideas?
I think everybody's been.
No zone last night. Did that surprise you, given the fact that Virginia Tech was 4 for 17 from 3?
I thought they would sprinkle something in. I did say, and they ended up doing it, switch defense. Like, I think Red believes in switching defenses for the sake of switching defenses, as some coaches have. We've seen over the years. Josh Pastner at Georgia Tech did that a bunch. Just come out every now and again and did a different defense just to freeze the offense one time or whatever. They pressed.
That's a great example.
Could have done that earlier.
He's coaching UNLV now. Literally, I think it was 2 nights ago. They were down 12 in the second half. They switched to a zone. They won the game.
Yeah.
So
sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I think it's just like throwing a different pitch in baseball to keep them off balance.
I thought Coach gave us a good answer on that. He said that they're a good shooting team, and we didn't feel comfortable being able to get out on their shooters.
Yeah, I think the overarching theme here is about the expectations of this team, because the talent is clearly better than last year and is an uptick across the board in what we've seen. The presumption is all of a sudden they were a top end of the conference team. They're not. And of that group of players, and I'm not here to rattle them all off, obviously at this level, every player has a shortcoming or something that they're missing. And the overlap of all that just isn't working out right now. Donnie Freeman's awesome. He's a pro, but he just did make 7 turnovers in a game. He did just miss a huge rebound, missed a huge free throw. And you'd rather have him than not. I would. You go to war with him. You're going to win a lot of games with him, but there's trade-offs. So whoever you want to take Nate George out for whatever reason. Turnovers, okay. Now you're going to put somebody in. Well, the person you're putting in isn't as good as him, or he would have been starting in the first place, overall. So they've no perfect players to this level. Maybe we'll see him at Duke or Carolina.
What'd you have for lunch? People want to know. Last question.
Killer, Sam. I'm glad you asked, because it was. I've had this before, but I don't remember enjoying it quite as much. Went with JT to a pizza next door to Dinosaur, and had, I don't even know if it's on the menu. It's a special. This is very much out of the Rick Beardsley camp. Chicken parm sandwich.
Oh,
where the crust is kind of like a pizza crust.
That sounds really good.
Excellent. I don't
red
go there that
sauce
often.
and cheese.
Yes.
Yeah, all right. Steve would have hated that.
It's a deal breaker for me with the red sauce, but that
my
sounds
God.
really good.
You don't eat red sauce or white stuff, right? So
Yeah, it's a tough combination.
that's unbelievable.
It is a tough. It's health. The red sauce is health reasons. The white
Health
stuff
reasons?
is
The white stuff is just psychosis.
I have really bad acid reflux, and the
my
red
God.
red
That's
sauce kicks
exciting.
it up. Yeah.
Make a promo out of that. Really bad acid reflux.
Yeah,
That's the name of my new
everybody
band.
who listens knows that. So
Excellent. Every time I go to lunch with JT, which a couple times, every now and again, that's a great spot to eat.
It is.
Great lunch spot.
All right.
Steve Infanti in the acid reflux will be opening P. Rockathon this year.
Yeah. Can he rebound? Hey, look, you apparently can sign players in January and put them in your lineup. So
Right. I said Judah Mintz. Let's go.
Yeah.
Bring him back.
Hasn't played in the NBA yet, so. All right.
There you go.
We'll wrap things up next.